Welcome to Suite 105. I'm so glad you decided to find out more about why you may be having aches and pains and symptoms. Certainly, the reasons you think are contributing factors. We do inherit factors and structure from our parents, and accidents can cause traumatic injury. And of course, we age. But the real reason is not any of those. And I'm going to give you an example of this. I'm going to share my screen now. And here we see two beautiful yogis. They're strong, they're flexible, but they're different. I want you to take a look at this. Certainly, I'm going to give you a hint, a big hint in a moment. But which of these two yogis do you think might have back pain? And if I show you this schematic, does that help you make your decision? The long sleeve yogi has distributed the workload of the movement over multiple joints. If you notice, her upper arm goes past her ear because her shoulder is more involved than the yogi that's in the sleeveless tank top. We'll call her tank top yogi. Her upper arm is almost in front of her ear. That's because her shoulder doesn't have as much flexibility. And because of this, she can only grab her toes versus the long sleeve yogi can grab her ankle. And you can sense how the tank top yogi externally rotates her hip. The hip on the side of the leg she's holding has to be turned out so she can grab it. This also hyperextends her standing leg. You have a sense that the tank top yogi's sternum, her breastbone, is going down versus the long sleeve yogi's, her sternum is lifting because she has so much lovely extension through her hip and her low back and her shoulder. Moshe Feldenkrais, whose work we do a lot of, says, until you know what you do, you have no choice to do otherwise. You see, most of us act like a 5-joint Barbie. We have a neck joint called the OA, we have a shoulder joint, and we have a hip joint. So those 5 joints take the workload of all the movement. And in the 1960s, Barbie got a waist so she could twist. So she had an L3, L4. That stands for lumbar spine vertebra 3 and lumbar spine vertebra 4. And that helped her some, but you can bet she would have had to have those fused by the time she was, say 30. Even in the 80s, when Barbie had an elbow joint and a wrist joint, she got a knee joint and an ankle joint, she still only had 14 joints to distribute the workload. I found an animation that shows somebody walking with about 14 joints. And you can see this person doesn't use their ribs, they don't use their lumbar spine. So their shoulders and their hips and their elbows and their knees and a little bit of their ankles is all they use. They pound into their joints. There's no use of anything but those few joints. And you can feel the workload going into those knees and ankles and hips. In this animation, you can see how we can attenuate or soften the force of work through the body. Our ribs move, our pelvis moves, our sacrum moves. I had a chiropractor come to a weekend workshop with me, and she said when she first saw this video, she thought it was ridiculous, that there was no way if their bones could move like this. But at the end of the weekend, she said, I truly feel like that video you made. We want our scapula and our pelvis and all of our bones to attenuate the force of the movement so no one joint gets left hung out to dry. Here's how we want our body to move. You may recognize this actor, but look how his scapula are moving. You can see my video in his walk. So we want to be able to distribute the workload of normal walking, reaching, bending over multiple joints, functioning more like a real person and not a 5 or even a 14 joint Barbie. So how do we do this? Well, there's something called awareness or mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is the most talked about modality in medicine today. And I've got a video coming to the YouTube channel that addresses it specifically. But by increasing our sensory awareness, we are able to realize what we're holding out of the kinetic chain, the linkage in our body, and what we can add back in. Just like tank top yogi couldn't tell she was only extending at her low back, fulcruming and putting a lot of work through it. If you showed her that picture, she couldn't have done anything about it because we don't know what we don't know. So when we begin to go through really understanding and listening and learning about our bodies, we can really start to sense and feel how there are different neural pathways, different ways we can initiate and organize a movement so it causes less wear and tear on joints. You know, many people have the diagnosis degenerative disc disease, as if you had malaria, that some external force had come into your system and compromised it. And that's not what's true. What's true is that your low back is an area of transition. And if you're not using your ribs and your scapula and your pelvis, then it gets all of the workload and it begins to break down. And it doesn't just happen to your low back, it can happen to a hip or a knee or a shoulder or your neck. And in the process of recognizing how you unconsciously hold parts of yourself and learning how to bring them back on board, you can offload that. And because you're living tissue, you're not a machine that has a screw that needs to be replaced. You have living tissue that can regenerate, and it can regenerate so much more than people can even imagine. And I can tell you some more stories about that in the suite of videos that I'll be doing. Stay tuned. We're going to have more information coming and ways that you can interface so that you could actually begin to learn these skills. Please feel free to go to nexuspt.net. I have free resources on my website. Leave a comment if you have any questions I can answer specifically, or if you have any data that you think might be helpful for all of us. I hope to see you soon.